In this video, I want to talk more about programming style than about programming per se. And in particular, I'm going to talk about comments and cells and spacing. Now, these are all concepts that I've already introduced in this course. I'm just going to spend a little bit more time and go into a little bit more detail than I previously have. So let me start with comments. So you already know that a comment is a piece of text that is ignored by Matlab. And to indicate comments, you use a %sign. Now what I'm showing here is that you can have comments be on their own line like this, or you can have comments start after the end of a line of code. So this would be for, if you have small comments that are just about this one line, then this is a good place for it. Larger comments should go in their own line here so they are readily visible to future versions of you looking back on this code and for other people who might be reading your code. There is a keyboard shortcut for commenting and uncommenting an entire line of code. So you can right-click on a line and select uncomment. You can see the keyboard shortcut is Control-T, and then the comment is Control-R. So I'm going to uncomment this, and that will uncomment this entire line. And now on my keyboard, I'm going to press Control-R, and that's going to comment this entire line. You can also select multiple lines. So now I'm selecting these 4 lines here. It's only 3 lines of code, or I guess arguably it's only 1 line of code. But I select these lines and I press Control-R, and that makes all of them a comment. So this was actually already commented. So you can see Matlab isn't really commenting or uncommenting per se. Instead, it is simply adding 2 characters to the beginning of the line, the %sign and then a space. So now I'm going to select these 2 lines and press Control-T, and that's going to bring us back to 1 %sign, which is now just a normal comment. All right. So you can also have a block of comments. So if you wanted to have multi-line comments, then you can use a block of comments like this. So a block of comments is a %sign and then the curly bracket. So this is not a square bracket, it's not a parenthesis, it is a curly bracket. And then you can write as much text as you want down here. This is all going to be commented until you get to a %sign and then a closed curly bracket like this. So this is useful if you want to have a longer description of what the code is doing. Okay, so that's about comments. That's pretty much all I have to say about comments. Comments are a great idea to use. You should definitely comment your code to make sure it's readable and understandable. And now I write all of my comments in English, partly because English is my native language, and also because most other people around the world, even if English is not their native language, most people who are going to be reading my code and using my code can also speak English. So even if English is not your first language, then I recommend, not that I recommend necessarily writing your comments in English, but I recommend writing your comments in the language that will be understandable to the most number of people who are likely to be reading your code. So in many areas and many disciplines, that is English. All right, so now I want to talk about cells. So that was about comments. So a cell I've already introduced in, I think it was the last video or maybe 2 videos ago. So a cell is like a paragraph. If you think about a piece of text, like if you're reading a book or a passage, then a paragraph is a piece of text that all is related to each other, and that's separated into a paragraph. You should write cells and think of cells like a paragraph of code. So inside one cell is going to be 1 line of code or a few lines of code or maybe hundreds of lines of code. It doesn't really matter how much code is in a cell. The right way to think about a cell is that all the code that goes into one cell is all closely related to one function or one sort of operation, one goal. And that can be a bit different from what you have in different cells. So, and then I also already introduced the method of running all the code in a cell, and that is by pressing Control-Enter, and on a Mac it might be Apple-Enter. So now I press Control-Enter, and you don't actually see this line of code or this line of code printing out in the command window. Instead, you only see whatever results are driven by the code here. So this says running this cell to print the number 1. Now, if you are changing the color of your Matlab desktop interface, then it's also a nice idea to make your cells be a different color from the other cells. So you can see here that I have my cells be a little bit darker. Maybe you can't see this. I think I will change the color. So I'm going to click on the Home menu option and then Preferences. And now I click on here, Programming Tools. And then in Programming Tools, you want to look for Section Display Options. And then, so we can uncheck this, and now they're not highlighted. And here I can show you, I will make this be, how about let's go for this like pink fuchsia color. So this is actually a really, really horrible color to make your cells because it makes it extremely difficult to read the code. Nonetheless, this is just for illustration purposes, so you can see what it's like when you have cells be in different colors. Okay, so let's set this back to black before I start crying here. Okay, so this looks good. The last thing I want to discuss in this video is about spacing. Again, I've already mentioned spacing in the first section of this course that was about using MATLAB as a basic calculator. And here the idea is basically that MATLAB and computers, they don't care about spacing. The spacing, this line of code and this line of code are identical from MATLAB's perspective. However, you want to make code readable and nice looking and formatted from your perspective and from other people's perspective. So spacing is a great idea. Spacing is often unnecessary, but always useful. I'm sure you agree, or I hope you agree, that this line of code is easier to read than this line of code, even though they are functionally the same. Now, I haven't yet talked about for loops and other control statements. So if this bit of code looks a little bit confusing, then don't worry about it. I'm going to explain everything about these two lines of code soon. It's probably in the next section of this course. But here I have this bit of code here and this bit of code here are, again, exactly identical to each other. The result is the same. They do the same thing, but I think you can agree that this piece of code here is really difficult to look at, whereas this code, we get the nice indentation, we get the spacing here. This line of code, or this bit of code, just looks a lot nicer. It's easier to understand what formula is being implemented here compared to this line. So in this video, I discussed aspects of programming style, including comments, cells, and spaces. And again, the main idea here is to make sure that your code is readable and to make sure that your code looks nice. You want it to be visually pleasant to look at. That's going to help you in the future look back at your code and understand what it's doing, and it will help other people be able to read your code and work with your code.